Well, as you will all remember, Perth was set to hold a bare knuckle fighting championship next month, and it would have been the first kind of fight of its kind in Australia. And as you will recall, there was a heated debate about it, a lot of public opposition, and WA's Combat Sport Commission actually ended up knocking the proposal back. And it did say that its decision was based on the application not meeting permit requirements rather than the public debate that was happening. Well, we're going to get a bit of an insight into how the promoter of this event is feeling, because they did break their silence through a statement that was released yesterday afternoon. And I do have in the studio Brett Bonetti, who has been working with the promoters at Knuckle Up Australia. You are also a combat sports commentator. And thank you for coming in, Brett. Good morning.
A pleasure to be here.
Why was the promoters so blindsided by this decision?
Well, tickets had gone on sale, and we're just waiting for a permit to be approved, which the promoters believe was going to be approved, and it was all knocked back at the 11th hour. It was done, I think it was Thursday, June 5 at 4:53 p.m. And the media was alerted around about that time, and it was just about that the same time as the promoters were contacted about it as well. So it was bizarre, the whole situation.
Why would you start selling tickets before your permit was granted?
Obviously, the promoters were very confident that they checked every boxes. They'd been working on the rules with the WA Sports Commission for well over a year, and all they needed to do then was get the permit. And obviously, they were very confident that the event was going to be taking place on July 19 at Perth Arena.
Why do you think they were so confident? Again, you're saying they thought they ticked every box, but again, I can't help but think that maybe it was a little presumptuous of them to think that they would get that permit.
It might have been because the permit was eventually knocked back. So again, this is a very different situation. The sport has never been here on any level before. So again, maybe it was, but again, when I say checked every boxes, they'd been working with the commission, so they probably had no reason to believe that the permit wouldn't have been accepted, and that's probably why they believe there was blindsided, and it was the reasoning behind it. They were still searching for answers, because the whole process of the answers have been very vague.
What do you mean?
Well, you saw in the statement that basically the health and safety regulations and the term amongst other things, and we're still trying to figure out what the amongst other things mean, and I don't believe they've listened to the real experts on the particular combat sports arena. So if you're going to have decisions made, go to the experts that have been involved in combat sports over a number of years.
Well, if I read that statement, and it did come out yesterday afternoon from Knuckle Up Australia, which was the event organiser and the promoter that you, Brett Bonetti, have been working closely with. It does say the Commission maintains reservations regarding injury risk and raised issues with a bout card. That was not finalised and assessed in Part 2 of the permit, which was due 21 days before the contest. While our submission and discussions address the Commission's concerns, we are now seeking clarity on what it vaguely referred to as amongst other things. As you alluded to, we'll assess our position in future events. So you don't know what they meant about amongst other things.
No, the only thing they've mentioned is about facial lacerations, and again, that's not life-threatening. And again, when I go to the experts, again, I've been working with two of the best doctors for over 18 years involved in combat sports, Dr. Daniel Lopez and Dr. Paddy Golden. If you want to get expert opinions from doctors and medical advice, they're the two people that you need to go to get this sort of event approved, in my opinion.
There were a lot of other doctors that did not like bare knuckle boxing.
But I believe they're experts in combat sports, and not everyone. I know I've heard the comments of the AMA before, but not every member of the AMA agrees with the position of the head of the AMA. And I know that for a fact because after speaking to several people. And the other doctors that have been commenting on that, again, I'd rather take advice from the doctors that have been involved in the sport, in combat sports, whether it be MMA, Muay Thai and boxing, for well over 18 years. I'd rather take their advice that have been on the ground, been at ringside, duty of care, than other doctors that have never been involved in the sport before.
So what do you then say to those doctors who say this was nothing more than sanctioned violence? police commissioner felt the same. He wasn't a fan of this for other reasons, and we'll get to that. They say it was sanctioned violence and sends the wrong message.
Well, what message is that? I mean, again, that's their opinion. I don't mind if people don't...
Street fighting in a cage.
Well, I don't believe that at all. I don't take anything in that at all. There's no link to street violence and combat sports as well. Myself, I hate watching street violence. I'd rather basically watch it in a sanctioned and controlled event where there's a referee there. It's sanctioned by officials. They've fighters have met weight requirements, medical clearances, everything they've gone through the books, and you're watching a controlled area where the referee has his duty, and also the ringside doctor, is to make sure that that everything is safe as possible in a combat sport. So again, that's all rhetoric, if you ask me, because I've heard the same rhetoric for a number of years, especially when the UFC was coming up, several years ago. You replace the word cage fighting and you replace it with bare knuckle boxing in 2025. It's exactly the same rhetoric, and I heard the term that we didn't want it back then. Well,
Colin Bonetti banned it. He
didn't ban the sport. He banned the cage. He made the uneducated decision, and it was a stupid decision to take away the cage in MMA. The sport was never banned. Jack Della Maddalena, who's the Perth's first UFC champion, his MMA debut was in a boxing ring in Perth. It was ridiculous. Colin Barnett did nothing except make the sport more unsafe. And not only that, it took away a lot of dollars from WA, because that particular event in 2013 that was supposed to be at Perth Arena, that went to Brisbane and made millions for that economy. And again, back then the message was, we didn't want it. No, he didn't want it. I think it's been proven that people do want it, because the UFC is now the hottest ticket at Perth Arena. Now, fast forward to 2025. This is an unknown with bare knuckle boxing.
Bare knuckle boxing's not UFC.
No, well, again, it's a combat sport.
No gloves. Yep.
No gloves. It's a different form of combat sports that is gaining popularity overseas. And again, when you say we don't want it, well, obviously the promoters believe that Perth do want it, because otherwise they wouldn't want to come here in the first place. And again, it's an unknown because it's never been here either on a local level. I've been calling fights for Australia's best MMA promotion, Eternal MMA. They had a ground up before the UFC come here, Dragonfire Boxing with boxing. So there's been local levels in other combat sports, but this is a different element. It's never been here before, and it's a different form. And I go back to the advice. I've been speaking with the doctors, and if they basically approve, I'd rather take the advice of the doctors that actually had experience in combat sports than the doctors that don't. I respect all doctors. I'm not saying I don't.
But you could also argue they have a vested interest in the sport.
Well, they're there to basically do a job and keep the athletes safe.
And get paid for it.
Well, it's a job. I mean, all doctors get paid for something.
Yeah, absolutely.
Again, that's a totally different area, if you ask me.
My guest this morning is Brett Bonetti, and I'll get to your calls in just a moment. He's been working very closely with the promoters, Knuckle Up Australia, over that bare knuckle boxing event that the Combat Sports Commission has knocked back. He's also a combat sports commentator, so he knows a lot about the industry, and I think it's really important that we get both sides of this. And this comes after Knuckle Up Australia did release a media statement yesterday saying they'd been blindsided by the decision. You talk about the safety, and what I found interesting when I was looking at the rules is that people have blood tests, obviously, because
Correct.
You have blood people
all sorts of tests.
Yeah, but not neurological testing. And there's been a push in America to try and get neurological testing. Why is neurological testing not done when there is the threat of concussion, repeated head knocks?
Well, I believe there's all sorts of testing. Again, I'm not a medical expert. Well, I'm not sure. You'd probably need to ask someone like Dr. Paddy Golden or Daniel Lopez about
checked.
that. But the thing is, a great example is Perth's own Jack Della Maddalena. Last year, he was due to have a UFC fight over in the States, and his opponent pulled out injured, and they got a replacement opponent. And they did all sorts of tests on him and on a second opponent, and found something that was basically could have been life-threatening, and obviously pulled that particular fighter from the test. So I believe that the combat sports area, they do as much testing as possible.
But it's not a regular neurological testing, and I'm just wondering.
Again, I'm not an expert in that sort of area.
But is there merit? If you talk about trying to make the sport safer, would there be merit in that?
I believe you've got to do everything as possible to make the sport safe for all competitors. I've seen it on a local level. Again, I've been calling fights for Dragonfire Boxing for a number of years, and they've pulled fighters out of bouts, before the event, right before the event, because they weren't cleared from the medical experts, from the doctors. So
what's
again,
Dragonfire Boxing?
Dragonfire Boxing is a major promoter in Perth that holds boxing events. So Danny Green was part of that promotion as well, Green Machine Boxing, all those sort of areas. So again, I believe that the medical experts involved in the sport do as much testing as possible to make it as safe as possible for the competitors.
You talked about, Brett, how there was some, a vague reference to, amongst other things, when you had the permit knocked back, or the promoters had the permit knocked back.
It was the timing as well. I believe it was a stalling tactic. That's just my opinion.
It was 4 o'clock on a Friday afternoon.
Well, not only that, they first said there was no appeal process, which was yes, there is. I knew straight away there was. I'm not. Again, I've got nothing but good things normally to say about the Combat Sports Commission. I've been working with a number of quality people there for a number of years. I believe they made the wrong decision here on this particular occasion. But when you look at the timeline, they've released an event for Saturday, July 19. They've knocked back the permit at the 11th hour on a Thursday at 5 p.m. Then they said there was no appeal process, which was correctly reported, but that's not the right process. So then there was an appeal process that took place a week, about the following Wednesday. And then all of a sudden it was like, then a further 7 days to bring back this particular vague answer that you've got in your hand now. That's a long time frame. And then you've got no time to put together the event. So I think that's where the vagueness comes from.
Do you think some other things might refer to some comments that were made by the police commissioner, who was part of some meetings with the Combat Sports Commission, who said some of the people that are associated, they come and watch these kind of fights, have a criminal element to them?
Yeah, I don't take any basis of that at all, because those sort of people are welcome at AFL games or football games or any other particular event as well. So there's no basis for that. Again, I can respect any caller or anyone who says they don't like the sport. You don't have to like the sport. I've got no problem with that at all. We're targeting people that actually do like combat sports, that are interested in it.
Do you think the Combat Sports Commission felt the pressure of the public debate?
They shouldn't have. I mean, again, they can't say it publicly because I believe it's written into their own laws. No matter how much background noise there is or outrage there is, it shouldn't come into effect on granting a permit for an event.
Well, I don't know if that's true, but
I believe it is. I've been told that.
If we could speak to the Combat Sports Commission, we would, but they spoke to us before they made the decision, but not after.
Exactly.
And I think they should
Why
be
they gone
speaking about this. So will the promoters have another go?
Yes, absolutely.
So they will be reapplying for that permit?
Yeah, absolutely. And again,
in Perth though, or will they look at another state?
Well, I think that anything's possible. And I go back to that example years before. We lost an event in Perth. It brings tourism. Conor McGregor was a massive draw card for this particular event as well. It is a growing sport, but it could go elsewhere. But again, the sport isn't banned. So Knuckle Up Australia and the BKFC, led by David Feldman,
who we've been talking to,
they're willing to work with the WA Combat Sports Commission. This is where I'm surprised. Again, you go back to the cage ban that Colin Barnett put in place. The WA Combat Sports Commission at that time strongly disagreed with that decision and strongly recommended that the cage remain in place. Colin Barnett ignored that and said, he based that on personal opinion. They usually make the right opinion, decisions here. But this particular time, I think that they need to make the right decision and work with the promoters. What do we do as promoters to bring the event up to standard to your liking, but also speak to the right people? You're worried about medical advice, speak to the doctors that have been in the game and have experience with that for over 18 years.
And the people behind Knuckle Up Australia, are they bare knuckle boxers themselves?
No, not at all. Sue-Ann Giles and her team at Knuckle Up Australia, female promoter, doing a fantastic job. And she's been working on this with her team for about 2 years. They've had that sort of goal to get this new form of combat sports to Australia for the first time. And that's the only thing that's different, as I mentioned before. There's always been local elements, whether it be boxing, MMA or Muay Thai, for example, but there's been no local element of this. So maybe as a prediction, as a combat sports commentator, maybe there will be a local element first, like the eternal MMAs of the world before the BKFC come here. I don't know. But again, the sport isn't banned. They just want to work with the commission. What do we need to do as a promoter to bring the event up to your standards and get those, amongst other things, sort of answered and clarified? Because to me, reading all this from the whole process, still very vague to me, and a lot of it doesn't make sense as a combat sports analyst.
So just to be very clear, they're going to have another crack at this to try and get this here in Perth?
Correct.
And if not here, maybe another state or another city in Australia?
Yeah, I think that it's destined to be here.
Tickets are being refunded at the moment.
Yeah, that's all the process.
What crowd did you think you'd get? What were you expecting?
Well, ticket sales were off to a start. And again, I heard comments like from Basil Zemplis to say that we don't want it. Well, no, that's not correct, because I go back to the UFC, we don't want it. I think that we don't want it is gauged by the ticket sales. So if you can fill up a Perth arena, for example.
Would you have, though? How many do you reckon you would have got?
It's possible. I said the Conor McGregor factor, the fact that it's the first time here, combat sports fans were excited about that. I've seen comments on social media, so some people do want it. Even if it is a niche sport and it is in the minority, that's where it's gauged from, the popularity of people actually turning up to the event, but we don't know at this stage. So I think that would have been successful because people were interested in it. Again, I called a box, and this is where it gives opportunity for other, athletes from different combat sports to want to give bare knuckle boxing a go. I had a fighter that I interviewed after he was victorious at that recent Dragonfire Boxing Thunderdome event, and he got on the mic. The first thing he said after he won, Bare Knuckle Fighting Championship is coming to Perth in July. I want to be on that card. So, again, it gives a platform for those particular fighters. But, again, it's affected the promoter. It's affected it gives these particular fighters that might not be good enough to be as successful in other combat sports, to be successful in this sport. It gives them a worldwide platform.
All right, I'll leave it there. Brett Bonetti, appreciate you coming in this morning.